So, the wonderful Russell T Davies has been back in the limelight, as there was an article floating around the other day in which he said that there should be a lot more Doctor Who content out there, like a Doctor Who channel, spin-offs, amongst other things. This comes off the back of the fact that the great RTD himself ran an empire of Doctor Who shows outside of Doctor Who, such as Torchwood and Sarah Jane, as well as the non-fiction stuff like Totally Doctor Who and Doctor Who Confidential. The RTD years were positively dripping with content. Right now, however, we only have the main show. There are no TV Doctor Who spin-offs anymore, despite Big Finish having an incredibly wide universe of Doctor Who content. So, it got me thinking, what would make a good Doctor Who spin-off? There's only one answer in my mind, and it's something that I think that this Doctor deserves at the very least. My own concept for a Doctor Who spin-off would be centred on the Fugitive Doctor. I've made my own issues with the concept and construction of the Fugitive Doctor abundantly clear, but there's one thing that I do love, and that is Jo Martin's portrayal of the Doctor. And if we have to play it this way, then let's give the Fugitive Doctor her own spin-off series. Now let me be clear, this is essentially just my own fan concept for a series, so it's not something to be taken amazingly seriously. It's more just, well, as it says on the tin, a fan concept, but one that I've been thinking about for quite some time. Of course, we don't know what the actual canon is for the Fugitive Doctor, so I've simply elected to make one up for the purposes of this video, before we find out what it actually is, if we do find out what it actually is. But firstly, we've got to be realistic about this. It's highly unlikely that the BBC will throw a massive amount of money at a spin-off, so we've got to keep it efficient. Torchwood, Sarah Jane Adventures and Class all managed to keep costs down by having one big set, and the rest set on Earth. Doctor Who doesn't exactly have that luxury if we're trying to make it as Doctor Who as we can, because it usually requires all new sets every episode bar the TARDIS, but reusing assets is a good way to save the money. It won't be able to go as all out as you'd want it to, but that just reinforces the fact that creativity would have to be harnessed to its maximum extent. And if the classic series proved anything, is that Doctor Who can totally do its best with a shoestring budget. I feel this would be a series driven more by the characters than how big the plots can be. So, let's talk about the characters involved here. We have our Doctor, the wonderful Jo Martin. Brash, arrogant, excitable, full of pride, with none of the angst that the Doctor would exhibit after the 8th Doctor. She's full of life and ready to take on the universe and any fools that come in her way. Of course, I would envision that she would go through a steady amount of character development through the series, with her becoming a bit softer towards her companions, while retaining that harsh edge towards her enemies. This Doctor would be confident even to a fault, and she needs to be able to show that because she can't be flawless. And above all, she is an alien, the most alien the Doctor can possibly be. She will indeed be more of a fighter too, so I would endeavour to show that transition between the fighty Doctor to the Doctor who uses her brains to solve things rather than guns and violence. But of course, I know I said she wouldn't have angst, but she would be dealing with the loss of her companion Lee, her husband for a time, and someone she entrusted to protect her, but ultimately he died for her, and this would linger. So now let's talk about her companions, because she's got to have companions. 2 companions to be exact. So for this, I definitely want to go outside of the standard present-day companion, but because it's a spin-off, it wouldn't be appropriate to go too far because of the audience surrogate element. But, having just watched Russell T Davies' new incredible drama It's a Sin, I would have to say I have a firm direction on where I would take the characters. So, let me pitch my team. The casting, of course, entirely fan casting, I don't have the budget for this sort of thing, would be, in my mind, Ollie Alexander and Lydia West, 2 of Britain's finest pieces of young talent, who demonstrated such magnificent range and chemistry thanks to the power of RTD's writing. So the through line for this team would be 2 young adults from the 80s, one shunned by their family, the other an orphan who never had a family, who are brought together in unusual circumstances with a woman who lost her husband and is running from her home. Everett is a guy who had grown up in the 70s and 80s and has had a very contemptuous relationship with his family, having never quite been able to live up to their unreasonably high expectations. Oh, and the lifestyle difference. And eventually this would drive him to run away from home permanently. He would become homeless as a result, jumping from couch to couch just to avoid the streets, until a disaster strikes and he is paired with the Doctor and another companion, Viola, an orphan who chose her name after her parents were killed in unknown circumstances, and she has been trying to find out why ever since. Very antisocial, she tries not to rely on anyone but herself. But above all odds, she befriends the Doctor and Everett, and goes travelling through time and space. See, I feel there is the makings of a genuinely good chemistry of characters there. But again, it's all about how you use them, and of course, the main facet of that will be revealed by the episodes that you put them through. So the bare minimum number of episodes that I'd want to include in this series is 7 to be able to tell the Fugitive Doctor's story and that of her companions. The first 5 would focus on adventures and character development, and then the 6th and 7th would be the finale 2-parter where we discover the Fugitive Doctor's origins and see her fate. Let's dive into it a bit more in depth. Episode 1. Obviously being the first episode, we're introduced to our companions, and they will be acting as our main focal point for it. We're exploring this 80s world from their perspective until they come across the threat for the episode, and a shadowy figure that seems to chase it away. This, of course, would be the Doctor. Everett will be the first to meet the Doctor, whilst Viola would be the one who saves his life while the Doctor battles the threat. The idea here would be to make the Doctor a more distant, hands-on figure, more intent on defeating the enemy rather than protecting the people. But this would begin to change when she has to let the villain go to save her new friends despite every instinct of her training telling her not to. Combine that with the enthusiasm we saw in Fugitive the Judoon, and we start to see how this Doctor starts to have more of a friendly side. All 3 of them by the end would feel like they have been united under a common circumstance. The Doctor on the run from her home and reeling from the loss of her companion Lee, Everett having been shunned by his family and banished for good, and Viola who doesn't even seem to have a family. They all had no one, but now, seemingly, they have each other. Episode 2 would be a standalone adventure based on space travel, and the Doctor freaking out her companions by taking them to an alien planet. Their first time, of course. This would be the romp episode to settle everyone in, and we can see this trio bond a bit more before we get into the real hardcore aspect of the series. For the threat this time around, the Fugitive Doctor would face against a bounty hunter who has come after specifically her, which will of course lead to questions from her companions about why this guy was so hell-bent on catching her. Episode 3 would be the character-focused episode for Everett. In order to continue to throw off the Time Lords, the Doctor revisits Earth in a different year, but taking little strokes while all the Time Lords will be taking broad strokes. The Doctor takes Everett and Viola to their future, 2019 to be exact. We can get some nice commentary on how things may look like they have changed, but they haven't really changed all that much. In particular, the companions trying to use a smartphone, elements like that. But the game changer element would be for Everett, who accidentally seals his own timeline by meeting his own father, 30-odd years in the future. He hasn't seen his son in 30 years, and is absolutely confused why he looks no different. Everett initially blames the Doctor for this, only to find that his father's contemptuous views are no different, even criticizing the colour of his company. Only his sister has some empathy and treats him with the love he deserves. This is very much a bonding episode for him and Viola too, while the Doctor reflects on the impact of her travelling. This episode wouldn't need a threat to carry itself, to be honest. I would power this through with just the characters, in a similar vein to the tortured episode Out of Time. Episode 4 would then be the character-focused episode for Viola, who wants to find out who or what killed her parents. The Doctor takes them back to the early 1970s to discover just this. They meet her parents, young, fancy-free, but with a baby in tow, her real name being Eartha. The Doctor warns her not to touch her baby self, for it would cause a paradox of untold chaos. Viola understands, and as well as that, she can't get involved in whatever kills her parents, no matter what. This episode would be the complete antithesis to Series 1's Father's Day. Ultimately, as the threat of the episode tries its final strike, the resolution would be simple. From her parents' perspective, she is just a random girl, but they would sacrifice themselves to protect her because they were simply good people. A self-fulfilling prophecy. Viola, Everett, and the Doctor would take baby Viola to the orphanage, and the time loop would be complete. Episode 5 would be entirely TARDIS-focused. On an attempt to escape the Time Lords once again, the Doctor, Viola, and Everett find the TARDIS sucked into an unknown part of time and space, the Void. In doing so, her companions start to panic over the prospect of being stuck there forever. But before they get too stressed, they find their future selves within the Void, and confront what could be their own futures. Half a century of life on the TARDIS while the Doctor is endlessly regenerating. Because in the Void, time won't change you. It won't let you die. It is space as hell. Now here is a particular gap where all of the Fugitive Doctor's hypothetical Big Finish box sets could take place, very easily. I would imply at least a year or two of constant travel for her, Viola, and Everett, and maybe even a few solo episodes. Also, imperative stuff this, but Viola and Everett would never become a couple. Never. They become best friends, and nothing more. And then that brings us to the two-part finale, and the ending of the Fugitive Doctor's life. Part 1 would see the Time Lords finally capture the Doctor. So during the tractor tow to Gallifrey, the Doctor would finally explain to Viola and Everett why she is running from them. Then we would have a flashback to the early days of her incarnation's life as an enforcer for Gallifrey, and her working relationship with Gat, and the first time she met Lee. This of course would culminate in her escape attempts, both failed and successful, and her subsequent chameleon arching. The episode would culminate in the Doctor forcing Everett and Viola to hide in the TARDIS while she comes face to face with one of her peers, one of the founders of Gallifreyan society, Omega, before his insanity. Bonus points if you re-air Fugitive the Judoon just after this episode airs. And then the finale. With the Doctor now captured, Everett and Viola hatch a plan to save her as Omega plans to wipe the Doctor's memory and force her to regenerate again. The Doctor herself demands to know why he's doing this, but she learns it's common practice to do this to rogue Time Lords. This episode would pose as analysis to the functioning of Gallifreyan society, and show just how corrupt it really was, while at the same time not really sticking his foot into anything to do with the Timeless Children, aside from the memory wipe regeneration. The Doctor would not try to escape this time, but the episode would be about her trying to save Everett and Viola from the Time Lords themselves. As for Everett and Viola, the Doctor would send them home in a way much akin to Zoe and Jamie in the War Games, with the sole exception of them keeping their memories. After they're sent home, the Doctor accepts her fate, knowing her friends will be okay. She smiles before she is forced to regenerate. Except, we don't see that. We leave it deliberately ambiguous as to what is to come next. The true ending of the series comes in a simple cafe, where Everett and Viola meet up a few months later, reflecting on their time with the Doctor, and then out of nowhere, they hear the familiar sound of the TARDIS dematerialization. The door opens, but which future Doctor are they about to meet? We may never know. And that just about wraps up my concept for the Fugitive Doctor series. I hope you guys enjoyed this video and that you found it somewhat enjoyable to go through. I had a hell of a lot of fun designing it. I mean, maybe one day I'll be encouraged enough to make a fan audio series of it. Maybe I will. Well, either way, thank you so much for watching. Sorry for the delay in uploading, it's been a hell of a week and a half, but I hope this makes up for it. Let me know in the comments section what spin-off series you would design for the Doctor Who universe. I'd love to see your thoughts. So until next time, see ya!